helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformations with Michael Hart, certified Christian counselor and director of Ottawa's Elim Counselling Services.
Hi, my name is Melissa Waggett, and I'd like to welcome you to this week's edition of Life Transformation, the Christian counseling radio show where chains are broken and lives are transformed. This radio show is brought to you by Elim Counseling Ministries, and with me in studios, as always, is Michael Hart, the director of Elim Counseling Ministries. If you've not heard of Elim or would like more information, you can always reach out to us at our website, elimcounselingministry.com. You can also find a link through the CHR website to our site as well. We are also available on social media. If you have Facebook, you can check us out there. Or if you have Twitter, you can get a hold of us. Tweet us show ideas, your comments about the show. We're happy to hear your feedback that way. Or if you prefer, we also have a phone. You can reach us at 613-699-1677. And as always, we have an exciting show ahead. We're going to be talking about agoraphobia. But before we get too far into this topic for this week, I want to pick your brain, Michael, actually. So first off, welcome.
Thank you very much, Melissa.
It's good to have you as always.
Mm-hmm.
For those listeners who may be hearing this radio show for the first time, maybe they're hearing the word Elim for the first time and thinking, what the heck is that? So I thought before we got too far into things, you could share a little bit with the listeners about what is Elim Counseling Ministries and who are the type of people that you see in your clinical practice.
It's a very, very good way to start. Recently I had a session where someone came in and I introduced myself, and just after introducing myself and we were about to start the session, he said to me, "Can I ask you a question that may seem like a very silly question?" But he said, "I thought you were Elim. I understand that you were the director here. So who is Elim? Are you Mr. Elim or you're Michael Hart?" Like, wow, how does that work?
The mystery Elim man. So I think that's a great place to start. So a lot of people think
it's a name, but Elim is actually a place. It's a place in the Bible. In the book of Exodus, after the Israelites were freed from slavery and bondage in Egypt, they traveled to a place called Marah, and in that place we are told that they had bitter water. So the first place they stopped was not a very good experience. But then they stopped at this place called Elim, where we were told that there were palm trees and that there were running water. And so Elim was the first place that gave them a sort of ray of hope, a sort of sense that there was newness and there was hope. So Elim represents a place of hope after a time of trial or hardship. So I thought that would be a very good name to symbolize that Elim, where people come for counseling, come to be changed, come to have hope, that this would be very symbolic to use that name, because indeed people do have that experience. They come here after a period of hardship. They come to Elim, that is after a period of hardship, and their lives are changed, they're renewed. As we said at the beginning of the show, that chains are broken and lives are transformed. And we're not just saying that just as a slogan. It's the experience of many people who come to Elim.
So now that we've clarified that you're not Mr. Elim and that Elim's a place that people can find hope and refuge, what kind of services do you provide at Elim Counseling?
So we do professional psychotherapy treatment. Like some people assume that because it's a Christian organization that we are not clinical and that our services are somehow inferior to clinical services at other places. But the opposite is true. We're as much as clinical or even more clinical than most places. What is so fundamental is that sometimes people come to my practice to other therapists to find out what I am doing and to sort of scout me out to see exactly who I am, what kind of services I provide for my clients. And then when I start getting into my qualifications and the areas of therapy that I am trained in, they would say something to the effect of, "Oh, you're more clinical than I thought." Mm-hmm. So I think there is an underlying assumption there that just because you're a Christian-based organization, you're not doing good clinical work. But I would like to dispel that myth to say that we offer professional counseling. The difference with Elim is that we offer it on a sliding scale. Because I find that one of the fallacy of professional counseling is that it excludes people who really need help. A lot of people who need help cannot afford to pay $240 an hour for a session, and this is the rate that is charged at some places, or some other psychotherapy practices, $180 per session. So at Elam we have a sliding scale that makes it very affordable to most people who help. And people who sometimes don't fall into that sliding scale, we will see sometimes people for very little payment because they just cannot afford, but they need the help. And so we try to make a way to see those people. I'd like to say to people who have donated to this ministry, thank you very much for your donation, because it is through those donations that we are able to do all of that, because we have to pay our therapists. Our therapists do this as a full-time job. They don't have jobs elsewhere. It's a full-time ministry for myself and others. So it's very important that we have the support from donors.
And so if someone's listening there and they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach out to get some help?
If they need to get help, we can be reached by phone. I think the phone is the best way to go, 613-699-1677. I think also that they could also fill out the counseling inquiry form online. It's a confidential form that goes to our intake staff, and that form sets the process in motion. So just by completing that form, we will then give you a call and set up an appointment to meet with you.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And it's great that you share and clarify, because sometimes I think we take for granted if people are listening, this is their first time hearing us. Mm-hmm. Who are we? What are we talking
absolutely.
about? And then this radio show is another component of the ministry where weekly we check in with the listeners with a variety of topics. Mm-hmm. And so if you're listening out there, maybe you've heard the show before and you've had topic ideas that come up, or you have questions about the show, again, reach out with whatever means works best for you. We've given them off the top, and we'll update throughout the show how they can get a hold of us. But we really appreciate your feedback, because it really helps guide our topics, make sure we're on the right track. And most importantly, if you hear something and it resonates with yourself and you say, I need help for that, it's also a way for you to reach out and hopefully get the help and the support that you need or your loved one needs. So get a hold of us. We love to hear feedback.
And again, the number is 613-699-1677. And you can also find out more about our contact information at our website at elimcounselingministry.com. Elim is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com.
Perfect. And so now I guess we're ready for the meat and potatoes of today's show. And I said it briefly off the top that we're talking about agoraphobia. So, Michael, you always seem to pick really big, long words for me to have to pronounce. I think
you're saying this one correctly.
This one I got right.
We don't have to bleep this one on the air, so I think this is a good
it's not
start.
as bad as others have been. So with this alphabet soup word of agoraphobia, if you could explain to us, what does this mean? That'd be great.
Well, agoraphobia is actually from a Greek word which means fear of the marketplace, and it involves people who have very intense fear and anxiety from being in a situation in which they feel they can't escape and they're likely to embarrass themselves. So there are people sometimes who feel that if I am at the mall and I am in a crowd, there's people around me, I'm going to have a panic attack. I'm going to go into anxiety, and I'm going to be in such a state of panic that I'm going to be an embarrassment to myself, and there is no easy escape. I can't just go into my room. I can't just disappear without anyone seeing me. So it creates this intense anxiety about being in situations like that. So one of the common maladaptive coping mechanism for people who have agoraphobia is that they tend to avoid those places. So people who have fear of being in situations where there are others around, they will become reclusive. They will stay indoors and refrain from going out. And it can get to a very extreme stage. There are some people who have such a fear that they will become unemployed. They won't go outdoors. They won't seek a job because just being outside is stressful. There are others that have had it so badly that they're unable to go to important family events such as birthday parties of other family members. So they will just stay home because there is a fear of being outside.
So how common is agoraphobia?
Well, agoraphobia is actually a branch of a panic disorder, and panic disorder is actually, in the broader sense, is actually a lot more common than agoraphobia. But agoraphobia itself affects about a third of the people with panic disorder. So agoraphobia, another way of explaining it's a fear of panic. It's a fear of a fear of a fear. So people who have panic disorder, they usually develop symptoms that they know triggers is a symptom that they're having the disorder. So when someone has agoraphobia, they actually become afraid of those symptoms. So I used the example of being in the mall before. Someone with agoraphobia will be afraid of having those symptoms in a public space, and so they become afraid of the symptoms, or afraid of having a panic attack, and then so it's actually a fear of the disorder that it actually turns into.
So I think you started to touch a little bit about some of the symptoms with that are seen in agoraphobia, but can you dive into some more detail about someone suffering from this condition would experience?
Well, some of the common experiences are very similar to people with panic attack. They can be rapid heartbeat, shortness of breath. People sometimes have this sense of dizziness, being disoriented, not sure where they are, having some people describe it as having like an out-of-body experience. They're totally disoriented. People sometimes talk about emotions of intense fear, a great sense of being in danger. So these are some of the symptoms that comes from being in situation that creates this high stress, this fear of having a panic attack.
And so when does this fear become an issue? Because I think for many people, there's things in their life that they're afraid of, maybe gives them that anxious feeling. Mm-hmm. So when does it cross that threshold into being something that's worrisome or needs some treatment?
Well, like all other disorder and other symptoms, it's when it becomes an hindrance to people living normal, functional lives. So for someone who has this fear of being outdoors, agoraphobia, and it's now at this stage where it's not just that they will go outside once in a while, but they're totally in at home all the time. That becomes problematic because it gets in the way of them advancing in life, getting a job, meeting someone, and getting into an adult relationship, for example. And so in those cases where we see that it's creating problems in the person's life and in their functioning, that is when a good sign that help is needed. But we're not talking about a typical person here who typically just doesn't like to go to the mall because they're introverted, but they will go, but it's not their first choice. There are many people like that. They would rather be at home. Some people listening to this show will say, yes, I'm a kind of a homebody. My best place to be is at home in front of the fireplace with a book, and I'm comfortable with that. But there's nothing wrong with that, because that's what a person likes. That's okay. But such individuals may find that they will all go to it. A friend calls and it's okay, they will go to the mall and they will have fun. But for people with agoraphobia, this kind of intense fear prevents them from being in those situations. So they will turn down friendships, they will keep putting off friends, and so they become isolated from others, and then that leads to a whole other problem, right? Because if you don't have friends, you're not going outdoor, then it can lead to other things such as depression and so forth. So that's when it becomes problematic, when it's really affecting the person's functioning in life. So if you're listening to this show today and you can begin to identify and saying, I know someone who is like that, I have a child who is having extreme anxiety about going to the mall or going to school, it's very important for you to get help and to try to deal with this issue, because the sooner it's dealt with, the better.
And so have they been able to identify what predisposes someone for this condition, or maybe what the causes of this condition are?
Well, there is not a known cause for agoraphobia. There's said to be a genetic component. It is said to run in some families. Like a lot of people who have agoraphobia, there are also relatives who have had that condition. So it is believed that there is a genetic component, but it could also be a learned component as well, by nurture, because if you have a family member, a parent, for example, that is adverse to going outside and is always at home with you, then as a child you grow up being indoors, not having the social skills to feel comfortable in social settings. And so being put in a situation where you have to socialize may lead to bad experiences, which may then lead to you having a reluctance to being in social setting and developing this fear, having a panic attack in such a setting, which then creates embarrassment, which then creates a fear of having another panic attack, which then leads to agoraphobia, full-blown agoraphobia. So it could be a social component as well as a genetic component that plays a part. But there is another aspect that I think may include some of what I have said before, and that is that there is often found to be cognitive distortions in the minds of people who have agoraphobia. So in other words, they will take one incident that has happened and they will totally blow it out of proportion.
We've talked about cognitive distortions in the past, but
right.
Could you give an example of what that would look like in the case of someone?
Okay, so someone with agoraphobia, let us say that this person had a bad experience 5 years ago where they were at the mall and they started having the sense of having a panic attack. Maybe they felt as if they had a shortness of breath and they had to sit down, and then in their minds everyone in the mall is looking at them. That's a cognitive distortion. Like, I'm in the spotlight, everyone is just looking at me, and I'm an embarrassment to myself and to the human race. That's a cognitive distortion, right? Everyone is looking at me. And then from there, just having this heart palpitation, having to sit down and, having shortness of breath and feeling like they're the center of the attention, the mind then goes to, this is going to happen every time I go to the mall. So therefore I will avoid going to the mall, and I will not put myself in that situation because I'm going to be embarrassed again. Whereas if you were to sit and begin to assess this person's situation and help them to, okay, so what really happened that day when you were embarrassed? How bad it is? How did you know that everyone were looking at you? How do you know that you were an embarrassment to others? You might find that there is actually no good cognitive basis for feeling that way. It's just assumptions that they have made based on what happened that day. So a lot of times part of the way of dealing with that is to deal with the cognitive distortion.
And I think that transitions beautifully into my next question about agoraphobia is, how's it treated? So if someone were to come to you and say, I'm suffering from these types of symptoms that you've just described, what type of therapy can they expect to see?
Right. So as you said, I've led into that question. So cognitive behavior therapy is a very effective and powerful way for treating agoraphobia because of the cognitive distortion that is often a part of it. So helping a person begin to see what is rational and what is not rational. So like if a person feels that they're going to have a panic attack every time that they go to the mall or that they're in a certain place or when they're with a certain friend, but the last 10 times that they've been there, it didn't happen. They were fearful of doing it, but they did it reluctantly, but then they just didn't have the kind of experience that they thought they would have. Now that can be used as a powerful tool in cognitive behavior therapy to say, you said that it happens every time, but the facts show that it didn't happen the last 10 times. So helping them to see that the fear may be exaggerated. And as they begin to see that, then people get into a situation where they can begin to look at their situation more objectively. So part of cognitive behavior therapy too is not only dealing with the situation, but also helping people to be able to measure how high their stress is. So we have what we call subjective units of disturbance, which is a measurement out of 100 a person can rate how high was the sense of fear that I had when I was in that situation. So if a person comes in and they said, yes, I remember I was in the mall and my fear level was up to a 9, then as part of treatment, you'd want to be able to get that fear level down so that the next time that they're there and they report on how high the fear is, that it would decrease, and then each time it would decrease to a reasonable level, maybe a 2 or a 3, but they are still able to feel comfortable while in that situation. So that takes me to another aspect of the treatment that we do with people who have agoraphobia, and that is exposure therapy. So the way to get over any type of fear or any kind of situation in which a person is feeling reluctant to deal with it, but realize that they need to deal with the situation in order to function and to be accomplished in life, is to expose the person to the situation. So if part of exposure therapy would be to have the person go into the anxiety-provoking situation, and to help them to be exposed to it more and more until the fear becomes less and less. Because the more you challenge those negative assumptions and it is found to be false, then the less it becomes.
And so with that exposure therapy approach, is it baby steps you take with the person?
Absolutely.
Or do you really push?
Absolutely. It's important to take baby steps. So thank you for clarifying that, because I don't want it to sound as if we just take them and say, okay, you're afraid of the mall. I'm just thinking
you're sticking them in a cab and saying, there you go, welcome to the mall, have fun.
Yes.
So it's not that...
It's not that kind of just right away in that exposure. It's a lot of work that you have to do in session, which is part of the exposure therapy, but prior to the actual place itself. So one of the things that you could do as a preliminary step is to have the person in session close their eyes, imagine that they're in that anxiety-provoking situation. How does it feel as you see people walking by and you're beginning to feel as if you're going to have a panic attack? Now take deep breaths. Just take some deep breaths and just imagine yourself becoming calm while people are walking by and you're okay. Imagine yourself being able to have a conversation with someone in that situation in the mall and feeling quite comfortable. So part of exposure therapy is having the person imagining being in that situation. You can also show people pictures of the situation that they're afraid of. So pictures of the mall, pictures of people in a busy mall, and then help them to imagine being in that setting that the picture depicts. And as they do that, it's amazing that people are able to get in touch with very deep emotions. Some people will have anxiety, panic attack symptoms just by looking at that picture and begin to imagine it. But that's what you want them to be able to do, to have a sense, to have a feeling of those panic while they're in a controlled setting. So you can help them learn to cope with it. So taking deep breaths, relaxing while imagining being in that scenario is very powerful because it prepares them. So that's part of the baby step. Then the next part of the baby step is not having them go in a mall to shop on Christmas Day. Right?
Yes, no. You go on like a Monday at 7 in the morning when it's just the mall walkers.
Right, but even less anxiety provoking than that is to have them just go walk in the door and then walk back out right away.
Mm-hmm. So it really is a gradual progression.
It's a gradual step. So you might go to, okay, all your assignment for this week is just to go to the mall, enter the door, and then walk back out. And do that for a couple of times. And how high was your subjective units of disturbance when you walked in that first, did that exercise for this week? So when they report to you the next week and you look at that, you said, how high was it? You look at your disturbance, it might be an 8 out of 10 that first time, or maybe 9 out of 10 that first time. But then you get them to repeat it again and again and again till they become bored of the exercise. Where they will
like,
say,
let me get past that front door.
Yeah, where they will say, I know I did it and I'm not feeling anything right now because all I am doing is walking in and walking out. They say, yes, that's exactly what I wanted. So now they're over that step. Then the next step would be to go in and to spend just 2 minutes
And then you just build.
And you build on that. So till eventually, once you start getting people over the excitement of even just going in and walking through the door, they realize it's not that big of an issue anymore because they're able to go in, they're able to walk around, and they don't feel the same sort of stress.
And so my next question for you, and I think you alluded to it with some of the ways you sort of guide people through their exposure therapy with deep breathing and relaxation, is the fact I've heard with some anxiety disorders, which you said agoraphobia is sort of a subset of, things like relaxation techniques can be helpful in people overcoming some of those symptoms.
Right.
Have you seen success in that?
Absolutely. I think teaching people how to relax when they're beginning to feel the symptoms and to self-talk themselves out of it is very powerful. So things like breathing exercise is a part of relaxation. Very simple exercises. There's nothing that is very complex in these exercises, but just having people, for example, just to, take deep breaths and just be conscious of, of the breath going in and be conscious breathing out and counting to 3 while breathing out and breathing into the count of 3, breathing out to the count of 3. These things can be very powerful because it keeps people anchored in the moment and not in the fear that this anxiety is building in their mind. So it helped them to just be present and not to think ahead. So deep breathing exercise is very, very powerful. But then there's also what we call progressive relaxation exercises that we do that teach people how to relax the different muscle groups of their bodies so that they if they're beginning to feel stress and beginning to feel that anxiety building up, that they can do these exercises at home and beginning to have a sense of relief. But I also like to say that none of this, if you're listening and you're wondering, okay, well, what about medication, for example? Do I really need medication? Let me just say that there are times when medication is needed because a person might be so high stressed and so at such a high state of panic that they need to have medication as a way of just helping them to relax, to begin to put some of these exercises in place. There are some clients who will say, when I'm having a panic, I just can't think. I don't remember. I can't even think of doing the deep breathing exercise because all I can think of is the fear that's ahead of me. So helping people sometimes to realize that taking medication is not necessarily a bad thing, and it doesn't mean that you have to be on this medication for the rest of your life either. A lot of people who have come in to see us at Elim with these kind of situations, they're able to get off their medication gradually with our help and with the help of their doctor. They're able to be weaned off it once they put in place the cognitive behavior principles that we teach them, and they overcome the fear. They don't have to remain on the medication for the rest of their lives.
And I think that's a really good thing to bring up, and we've talked about it in past shows, is when you're dealing with these issues, having people like yourself and physicians and things that have a holistic approach to these things and using all the tools available within this sphere of practice to get the best outcomes for patients.
Absolutely.
And so for people out there who may be fearful of even accessing these services, I encourage you to reach out and to speak to someone who knows the field well, like yourself, and to hopefully get the help that you need.
So if you've been listening today and you say, I can identify with this agoraphobia, the fear of being outdoors, the fear of the marketplace, or you're saying I'm having a panic disorder, I find myself having frequent panic attack, I'd like you to know that you can be helped. Psychotherapy it's a very good way of treating these disorders, and psychotherapy and the medication have been shown to be very, very effective. So don't delay in getting help. Sometimes the sooner you get help, the better. If you're a parent and you have a child who's going through this, then help is available. If you want to contact us, or if you need to contact us, we can be reached at 613-699-1677 or our website at elimcounselingministry.com. Until next time, this is your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counseling Services,
and Melissa Waggett,
praying that God would bless you in all your relationships and keep you sound in mind and pure in heart.